Again, you can use your initials or your full name.
Brianna Mitchell.
Thank you. Please have a seat.
Your Honor, my name is Brianna Micciolo, and I appear before you today not only as a grieving mother, but also an advocate for justice. On behalf of my son, Corey, I stand here before you to plead for justice that Corey rightfully deserves, and to press for the maximum sentence of Christopher Gregor, whose actions have inflicted irreparable harm in our lives. For you to fully understand the gravity of the situation, I will flash back to the July of 2013. This day marks the beginning of a traumatic journey defined by manipulation, abuse, and ultimately an unspeakable loss. At 16, I first met the defendant, who was 21 at the time. He proceeded to feed me drugs, alcohol, and took complete advantage of me, which led to the conception of Corey. From day one of my pregnancy, I knew I would keep Corey regardless of the way he was conceived. Corey didn't ask to be brought into this world, and I knew I owed it to him to bring him into this world with unconditional love. Corey was and still is my life, my world, and my everything. I would also like to speak about my past, which I am not 100% proud of. You heard a lot about it throughout the trial, and so did a lot of the world. It was very upsetting for that to come out because I've worked extremely hard for many years to be where I am today. I admit I abused drugs, but during the trial it was made out that for some reason my son deserved to be killed because his mom was a drug addict. That is absolutely disgusting. I stand here today clean and sober, and I know Corey would be so proud of me. Unfortunately, my son is no longer here to tell his story, so I'm here to be his voice and tell his story along with all the others sitting in the gallery who have continued to stand by me. Not once have you seen the defendant shed a tear for Corey in the last 3.5 years since he killed him, and today was fake. I don't believe a word he said, and I don't accept any apologies. He has no remorse for any of the actions he committed, and his only remorse, like you saw today, was for himself because he got caught and convicted. Another reason I could think of is, everything he had done to Corey was done out of spite towards me. Another reason I could think of is he's sick in the head and used Corey as his punching bag. On April 2nd of 2021 was not the first time that he abused Corey, but it was the last time. He never had an ounce of love for Corey. And to the defendant, Corey was just an inconvenience in his life. He never hugged him. He never praised him. He never told him he was proud of him or that he did a good job. He punished Corey every chance that he could get, and I cannot even begin to imagine what my son dealt with behind closed doors with this man. On April 2nd of 2021, I hesitantly dropped Corey off at the defendant's home, which is a mistake that will haunt me for the rest of my life. I kissed my son goodbye unknowingly for the last time. I wish I knew what was going to happen and I would never let him go. At 3 p.m. the same day, I received a phone call from the defendant where he stated Corey was very sick and he was taking him to the hospital, and then hung up on me after he asked for my insurance card. As an extremely concerned mother, I called him back with no answer and continued to do so along with texts for hours to find out where Corey was and what was going on. For those few hours, my mother and I called every hospital in the area with no luck. The very last hospital finally said he was there. Then there was a knock on the door. It was our local police there to tell me Corey had passed away. My healthy 6-year-old boy who was just alive and well with me a few hours ago is dead. My heart dropped and my whole body collapsed from the shock that took over my whole body. I was unable to breathe. My mind was racing, and I felt like I was no longer inside my body. All I remember is screaming that they had the wrong child because Corey was fine this morning. I actually convinced myself that it wasn't him and they had the wrong kid for a while. My next question was, where is Chris? I needed to know what happened, and he was nowhere to be found until the next day, when I found out he was in Tennessee. No one was able to tell me what happened to Corey except Corey died at the hospital. I couldn't even see my son until a week later at his funeral because his body was evidence. The defendant took away my chance to say goodbye to Corey while he was passing away, and not once did he pick up the phone he was using to converse with many of his girlfriends, to call 911, to seek medical attention, which could have potentially saved Corey's life. Instead, he allowed Corey to suffer silently for hours. Once he realized how bad it was, he threw him in the car and then proceeded to drive 15 minutes to the hospital. He slowly walked Corey into the hospital with no sense of urgency, even when he knew how bad his condition was. I fully believe that if we took Corey to the hospital as soon as he received the lethal blow, he could still be here today. There were many steps he could have taken to save my son's life. Instead, he sat home and let Corey slowly die for hours. Every day since April 2nd has been an absolute living nightmare, and it is now the new reality for me to replay Corey's horrific death repeatedly in my head. It's the first thing I think about when I wake up in the morning, and the last thing I think about before I fall asleep at night. I dread normal conversation with people, because I always get asked, how many kids do you have? I say 2, and they follow up asking how old are they. That's when the grief sinks in, and I have to tell them my 6-year-old was killed by his father. It is such an indescribable feeling. When I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, a sense of guilt was all I could feel. I wanted more kids, but how do I love another child? Is it fair to Corey? That is all I could think about. Now I know this is not true, and I love my daughter with all my heart, but I always will feel an emptiness, no matter how many children I have. My new reality is explaining to my daughter what happened to her big brother and why is he not here. I live in fear every day, every second of the day, that something will happen to my daughter, and I will lose her too. It's a horrible feeling, and it causes me such bad anxiety. I take her to the cemetery to see Corey every weekend, and at 1.5 years old, she knows where Corey is, buried. It is every week. It is heartbreaking. She sits and plays with the cars and toys we left there for him. I live in a nightmare, and I would never wish this feeling or how I must live on my worst enemy. Throughout everything he did to Corey, Corey still loved him. He looked up to you, and he still wanted to be, I'm sorry. And he still wanted him to be like a real father who treated him like a son. Instead of being a good role model for Corey, he decided to beat him to death. Why? Were you jealous of him? Did you hate me so much that you took it out on Corey? Were you abused as a child? Not that that's a good excuse, because you could have overcome it and became the protector he needed as a child, but instead you became a killer. There was no amount of love in his actions, and only a disturbing amount of hate. It seems like he hated Corey simply because I loved him, and he felt deprived of that love. He couldn't even control himself for long, because after the first visit with my son, he started abusing him. My son didn't even know him, and he was beating him. He was abusing him from the first time. I thank God. I hate you for not letting me say goodbye to my son, but I thank God your face is not the last one he saw. I'm sorry. What this monster did was pathetic, disgusting, and I wish him nothing but the worst. One could only hope that karma comes to him quickly. After all he's done, you would hope he'd admit what he's done, but no. Instead of grieving, I had to fight for justice for 3 long years. Go to trial just to relive everything. I had to see that video that I never wanted to see. I didn't have to see it until 2 weeks before this trial. I went 3 years without seeing it. Oh, I'm sorry. Just for you to be found guilty anyway. What was the point of that? Just to make it worse for us? Are you that crazy that you convinced yourself you didn't do this? I hate you. I will never forgive you. And I'm going to skip that one. You have stolen my full potential happiness. And I will never have my son back. My family will never feel whole again. My daughter will never get to meet her brother. And my boyfriend will never get to be the father that the defendant should have been to our son. He took my whole world away from me. He has shown and proven to be that special kind of dirtbag he claimed I was. Your Honor, all this monster had to do was say he did not want to be a father. No one would have made him. I would have happily continued to raise my son alone with the help of my family. He had many opportunities not to do this to him. He is in this current situation due to his own actions, and every day he will have to live with this. He deserves nothing less than to experience the pain, suffering, and isolation that he inflicted on Corey. I hope that every moment he spends in prison is haunted by the torment of knowing he killed my child. I fear when Christopher Gregor gets out of jail, whenever that is, he will come after my family and I again. I fear for our lives. His twisted mind truly thinks that I caused all this and that he's in jail because of me, even though he's here because he killed him. I truly believe if he ever gets out and gets the opportunity, he will kill me. Your Honor, Corey should be going into 5th grade in September, hanging out with his friends, playing sports and enjoying his life. Instead, he will never experience finding his first girlfriend, graduating high school, falling in love, driving a car, getting married, or having kids. Christopher robbed him of his entire future, and Corey could have easily lived until he was 80 years old. He stole over 70 years from Corey and thousands of memories he could have made. I will never see my son again. I miss him and I love him so much. There are countless reasons Christopher deserves the maximum sentence. He rejected what I considered a generous plea deal, which shows how selfish and ignorant he is as a person. I beg you to not allow this injustice to continue, and he must face the full consequences of his actions. Thank you for allowing me to speak, Your Honor.
Thank you for your comments, ma'am. Ms. Lenta.
Your Honor, the state would move for